Welcome to Sport Beach. So fun to be here in NOLA. Woo! We're really excited to bring out a group of complete rock stars to talk about sports partnerships in 2025. Feels like the right place to do this in the middle of Super Bowl week. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to it. I'm Evin Shutt. I'm the global CEO of 72 and Sunny. We're proudly a part of the Stagwell family. We work closely with the NFL. You will see our Super Bowl commercials later today and a bunch of other amazing brands. And it's my honor to moderate this panel with the following. First, I have Alma Angeles. She is an incredible leader in sports marketing. She's worked in the NBA, the WNBA, Major League Soccer. Her innovative approach has set the benchmark for many of those leagues' commercial growth. And throughout her career, she's led global teams, negotiated major deals with Fortune 100 brands, and ideated innovative partnerships. She now runs her own advisory and consulting firm, The Partner Lab.
Yes.
Welcome, Alma.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Kelvin Beachum. Any Cardinals fans in here? Woo! Kelvin is a 13-year NFL veteran and current offensive tackle for the Arizona Cardinals, coming off a great season. Congratulations. But outside of being a professional athlete, he's also an incredible advisor and investor, and including an advisory board for NFL Players, Inc., the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, and Donors Choose. He's also a member of the Players Coalition and the NFL Player-Owned Social Justice Working Group. Whew. And that's just like scratching the surface on both of them so far. And lastly, I get to welcome up Jessica Gelman. Woo! Jessica's the CEO and co-founder of Kraft Analytics Group, so we're going to get into that and talk about that. Amongst other things, they work with most of the major league sports in the U.S. And colleges and other sports industry leaders. She's also co-founded and co-chairs the largest analytically focused sports conference, the MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference, and serves as a minority partner and alternate governor on the board of the Utah Royals in the National Women's Soccer League. Woo! Pretty awesome. All right, we're going to jump right in. We're going to talk about what sports partnerships look like in 2025. And we've all had this conversation. When it comes to investing in sports and how brands think about it, it's one of the last territories where it's not totally data-driven yet, Jessica. And it's fascinating. It reminds me a lot of the corporate social responsibility space many years ago, where it was whatever the CEO's passion is, that brand tends to do it. That really got called out a lot starting in 2020. I think we saw a big revolution and change. And brands had to walk the walk in addition to doing what they say they were going to do. Sports, on the other hand, still sometimes falls into the CEO is like, yes, I'd love my logo on that stadium, but it's really hard to measure the ROI against it. And so you can look at this from an asset level, a league level, a team level, an athlete level. There's a lot of dynamics and there's a lot of ways to play. And now, which we're really excited about, with the rise of women's sports, it's even more abundant, the opportunities, but also more complicated of how do we play. So we're going to get into it. Jess, I've got the first question for you. First of all, explain to us all what Kraft Analytics Group does.
Sure. So we're also known as CAGR, which is a play on a financial term. But the key here is how we help our clients better understand who their customers are using tech and data. So we, very proud the Eagles are one of our clients. As an example, the NCAA, the Philadelphia 76ers. We are their actual data warehouse and helping them with how best to reach their fans or new fans and give them the right product at the right time. And then we also do a tremendous amount of strategic consulting of how to use and apply that data in programmatic, digital, direct marketing. So very much first-party data focused. We touch over 70 million sports fans through our various clients, which is approximately half of the known sports fans in the United States, as an example. So,
just a small group.
I think when you talk about what the teams have been starting to do, I would say the more progressive teams, they understand the importance of the data as an asset and are investing into it. Kind of to your point previously, though, the sponsors are increasingly not just looking for having their logo. They need return. They need to be able to show the value from their sponsorships. And we're starting to hear that in a significant way. But most teams are not yet set up to be able to, one, capture the fans and share that in the right way, and maybe don't even really want to, because it's challenging. So there's this very significant evolution where we're in the early days, as you said, and we can talk about women's sports, but I think it's going to ultimately be a great driver of pushing this forward too.
I love it. It's so important in the work you're doing on really trailblazing. How do we do this? As we talk about it, what's the value of the patch on the jersey? What's the value of the name on the jersey? How do I understand that ROI? And I think your data is starting to break through on that.
I think sponsors are only now just starting to meaningfully ask for it. And so the rights holders, which are the teams and the leagues, they are increasingly being forced to think like that and become more sophisticated with the technology and data that they have in-house. And that's a big evolution that's, obviously when we were founded about a decade ago, it was early days, but it's increasingly becoming the norm. But it's still like very challenging, and there's, I would say, a huge opportunity to connect what the sponsors want and what the rights holders have.
So much of the creativity of this is in the deal, right? And the ROI of how you're going to measure it. So Alma, I'm going to turn to you. You've worked at the league level, the team level. You have athlete relationships. Tell me, how does a brand know what's right for them? What level should they enter into that agreement? From your experience, how do you know that's going to work or not work?
Yeah, definitely. So there's different levels to it. It's goals that they want to achieve, budget, where do they want to go, and reach. So I think those are the three pieces that you have to identify first as a brand. Then you go into looking at each property by itself. So with the league, it's wide-reaching. So mostly, if you want to go down that path, you want to be seen, and you want to almost get credibility. Then you drop to the team, and now you're going to be regional. You're going to be able to focus and actually engage, because you're going to have personal touch points. Player, that's where it gets fun, because then you go storytelling. You have somebody communicating. There's that personal ambassador to your brand. So really, there's going to be 3 tiers, and we can get into details. But really, at the very beginning of it, you need to know what your guiding is, what your North Star. And like Jessica mentioned, it's a lot of that homework that they need to do, because then from a property standpoint, it's really challenging to know where to go with it when you react to the information that's presented to you or what's asked of you. And it's true. Most of these teams are very green in that space. So any tidbit that we can collect beforehand to help guide, because that's what we are. We're experts on the property side. We have to guide and really educate. I'm on the sales side, so I'm going to be a little bit greedy too. So sometimes I'll just kind of let go of things. The money's the money. But it'll nip you though at the end, because when you have to do valuations and you have to do measurements and really show KPIs. So if you don't start well at the very beginning, it's going to burn you at the very end.
Absolutely. I think you have to look at this as the life of the partnerships and what you want out of it, right?
Well, so I will just say, we are starting to hear from it on both sides. So we have brands coming to us and saying, how should we think about, in a specific market, what is the best value, right? And we will bring a very data-informed approach to think about that. So we've done that with several different brands. But then on the other side, we have the Eagles as an example. They had a partner of theirs, AAA, come to them and wanted to literally match in a clean room, which is a capability that we have to understand what the overlap was. So there is a push-pull in both ways, where the rights holders are needing to become more sophisticated, but also the brands, they're learning and starting to understand the data, because it isn't just, here's my favorite player or my favorite team.
Yeah, well, I think more and more, and if there's any CMOs out here, the pressure is real to deliver immediate results, yet also build the brand, right? We've seen the swing back and forth. It's very cyclical, but the pressure to deliver results is high. And we hear that repeatedly of, how do I do this? How do I do this right? Kelvin, as a player, let's start there, and a teammate, you've done partnerships, you've seen other partnerships. What's your perspective on what makes a good deal and how to go about it? And then we'll get to your point of view as an investor as well.
Yeah, I think what Alma just mentioned moments ago is the storytelling aspect of the equation. And as an athlete, when you have that ability to have authentic storytelling in relationship with the brand, that allows that relationship and that partnership to really do things that it, didn't anticipate. What Kager started almost a decade ago and how athletes have been involved in that particular ecosystem, that's a relationship that you can't just strip out. It's very sticky now. And I think what athletes are really hoping for and longing for now is real relationship. We understand that we play a sport. We understand that we're entertainment. We understand that things can be transactional. But I think in today's environment, when you think about brands and partnerships and those types of things, that ability to have that authentic storytelling and it coming from both sides is so important right now.
So true. I think the brands have to walk the walk, right? You have to have the shared values from the start.
And I think
Alma.
Kelvin mentioned something that's very important. The reason that the fans are there in sport, it's because it's a passion point. The players engage and they give their all on the court, on the field, whatever it is. So the fans are going to go into it. So if the brands can't capitalize on that and really come into the space in a meaningful way as everything else, as the environment, then it's going to be a challenge. That's why we talk about like the logo slaps don't work. It really doesn't. We're talking to people that have a heart, that have a passion, that have a pulse, that are there for a reason. So when they come to players, you guys translate that to the brand, and it's magic once it hits.
When it hits, and sometimes it doesn't hit, and I don't see the brand in here, and I don't want to say their name, but there was a partnership that I did this year where it just didn't hit. You tried to blanket and do something very similar in every single market around the National Football League, and it didn't hit. You can put as much money behind it. You can be a massive brand that's up under a huge umbrella, but if it's not authentic for the player and for the fan, they can see right through it so fast.
It's so true. I'm curious do you think data can help with that, Jessica?
Yes, it should be able to help with that.
And it's very interesting though, because so as an example, the player impact, I just want to stay on that for one more minute. If you look at the social media following of like a LeBron James versus the LA Lakers, I think it's like 6x. Now, the difference here is that the players are not capturing their fan customer names in a first party way. That is something that really should evolve and should be done, and I think the agents need to also evolve to support.
So
the
they
players.
Should be calling Kager, right?
Yeah, they should.
Yeah,
they should.
just keep
Are,
going.
are athletes directly able to join Kager? Is that allowed as well?
We could talk. But I think this is really important, and this is something that I've seen a little bit more in with the female athletes, probably because they haven't had the financial wherewithal. They're not necessarily earning it from their salaries. But you look at like a Kristen Press and a Tobin Heath, and they've created this Re-Inc platform, but they have a membership program where people pay to have access to things, and they're capturing first-party names. I'm not sure if they were necessarily connecting that, but I think I see that continuing to evolve. So I think with respect to the amplification by brands in market, I think how the brand effort will evolve and change is they will still do the really awesome, creative logo. They need the rights, but brands will start to amplify more targeted and more personalized within the specific markets, and they're gonna have to show that here's the market share we had at the beginning of the season, here's the investments that we made in specific campaigns, and here was the results. And the teams or whomever, the players, whomever they are associated with, are going to have to support that in a different and more advanced way. Again, this phrase performance marketing, I think can be scary, but it's literally segmentation and lookalike modeling, and that's what we specialize in helping to support, and then hitting the right customer with the right channel at the right time. So my 11-year-old son is gonna wanna engage in a very different way. He doesn't have a phone, he has a computer, he has an email maybe, but that the level of how to reach each of the fans or the types of fans is gonna evolve in real time more meaningfully.
Absolutely. Let's talk about, again, sorry not to dwell on the not working, but I think it's important to understand the red flags in doing partnership deals. So I think, Alma, I'd love to hear on deals you've done where you've been uh-oh, this isn't gonna go well. And Kelvin, I think just your instinct of what you've learned and what you've observed on that. And then obviously we've talked about how data can help us reach the people at the right time in the right place. Go ahead, Alma.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think from the very, very beginning we mentioned it, and I think we had a conversation, KPIs. Any partner, any brand that's going to come into this space blindly, that they're just following it because it seems cool and whatnot, that is a red flag completely, because it's going to be the foundation of it. Then they're going to ask for measurement. Everybody does. Everybody wants a return on investment. And if we can't prove it because we're not tracking it, because we don't know what we're doing, that is by far our biggest number one red flag from a property standpoint. The other one is when you see deals that are one-sided. Back to the passion point. I think some folks forget that brands come into a space that's already existing. There's already a culture, there's a communication style, there's a fan that expects something. So you have to make sure that when this brand comes in, it's authentic to the space, it could play nicely, and they're also gonna amplify the voice of the property too. So it can't be one-sided. That's one of the big ones that you have to be careful with.
And I think to lean into that, speaking on that one-sidedness, you have to also be careful with the brand that you allow to come into that particular conversation. I think everybody has seen everything that's happened within the crypto ecosystem and how you had crypto names that became naming rights entities for certain stadiums around the country, and now those same companies are no longer even in existence today. So in that particular case, you have to be careful about, again, that authentic nature in which those brands are being able to, broker those types of deals to make sure that it's a two-way street and it has the viability to be around for some time.
Sustainability.
Sustainability,
So
correct.
you hit on two things, and the other one is regulatory. So
That's a whole different can of worms.
Regulatory, sustainability, and reputation. Those are the other ones that, as you're vetting out a brand, you have to definitely look at, because they will shift the way that you go ahead and the longevity of it. Sometimes I've been in it where a brand and a partnership seems awesome, and within a month you're with legal trying to figure out how you're going to get out of it, or the league calls you and you're like, oh no, or beyond. So you're right.
Kelvin, as an advisor, an investor yourself, how do you evaluate? Well, first of all, Alma just gave us all a really good checklist to go through, but how do you look at that and think about that?
I think about how credible is that brand, how credible is that company. We were just kind of highlighting just some of the conversations around where technology is going. We were just talking about scheduling. Something as simple as scheduling within sports. Is that something that's needed? I think, you were talking about NYSL, right?
The NWSL. Sorry, NWSL.
Tongue twister.
NWSL, the National Women's Soccer League.
Just say the National Women's Soccer
National Women's Soccer League. I got that right. But it's one of those things where you want to see a company that can actually come in and provide substance, credibility, technology uplift that allows that particular ecosystem to thrive. So for me, if I'm looking at anything in this particular ecosystem, is this going to be a category driver? Can it drive that category? And there are some companies that I think that are starting to do that in certain sports and hitting a number of sports. And I think, like you mentioned, within women's sports, because they've had to be more understanding of capital, they've been, you think about a company that's being scrappy, they're very gritty and they understand how to be capital efficient within today's society and today's kind of ecosystem as we think about investing in, technology and the intersection of sports and technology.
So there's this phrase, it's called tech debt. And one of the challenges of, not challenges, but men's sports is old. And
Very.
There's a lot of
Not
ways.
Kelvin, but men's sports.
No, but but there's ways of doing it. But women's sports is they're starting from basically at the very early days. So which means that there's a different approach and way to build the business. And I think understanding the differences, and I would say specifically on the tech and data side, getting that right at the beginning, the number of when we come in and become a partner and are the data warehouse, the number of other systems that get changed out because they're 5, 10, 15 years old, they haven't evolved with the organization, that change management process is painful. You're doing two jobs at once and hard. And so women's sports and the people who are now investing into women's sports have an opportunity to do it differently, better, if they take that approach.
And I think you're seeing that real time. I don't know if anybody's been following Unrivaled. It is fascinating to see that brand and how they're moving the game, but also moving the experience and the technology that's surrounding that game right now.
It's unbelievable. The Sephora partnership they did just blows my mind of the glam room for all of the players and the insights into it and what the players care about. They're getting it right. When we work with a lot of brands, we always say women's sports didn't get here the same way as men's sports, so you can't treat it the same. You can't approach the partnerships the same. You can't approach how you show up, how you support the athletes. They have different needs. They have different ways of telling their stories, and you need to put the athletes out front.
Well, and I think the other thing that we see, I mean, obviously you have a much broader reach with men's sports, right? And so it is like you'll get more of a return because there's more people who are following today. But with women's sports, you're going to have a much more engaged fan base. And so, I think the challenge for brands and sponsors now is like, what is the right value for the investment? And then you're also like, as athletes' salaries continue to increase, like this becomes a really challenging situation to continue the growth of the overarching women's business model, but also make sure that the brands are spending appropriately to support that growth and getting the returns that they need.
I want to jump in on that because I think there's this balance of emerging sports, women's sports, or even
TGL.
Yeah, it can be anything, right?
That's a good one.
Flag football, right?
Did you invest in TGL too?
I cannot accept
No
or deny
comment.
that. No comment.
Yes. No comment.
To be continued.
I got you, Kelvin.
To be, it's,
More to come.
Well, it's still early, but when you think about these emerging sports, it's still early. I had an opportunity to invest in Drone Racing League early on.
Yep.
They just got acquired.
Yeah.
You want to see a massive outcome, but even in an emerging market like that, it's still room for growth. You look at the Snow League that's starting with Shaun White.
Yeah.
Super interesting, but now you have to think about, all right, well, what does that look like when you combine both sexes in a sport that has historically had great successes on both sides of the equation? You had the National Cycling League, which I thought was going to be, this entity that had the ability to bring both sexes and kind of battle the sexes in a way to race on bikes.
Yep.
It folded. So
it
did fold. So you see some of these entities where these emerging opportunities have great momentum, but lack execution in some ways, which goes back to.
Thank you. This is my best salesman.
But it goes back to the need of a data-driven, evidence-based approach.
Yeah. Did you want to jump in?
I was just going to say the big thing is the marketing side too. I think we become experts on forecasting. What is a cultural sense? Where is the social norm going? What's the wave? What's the movement coming up? Because I love data. That's the biggest thing that is our backbone. But I'm built on humanizing it as well. Because we are talking about the dynamic of likes and wants, and sometimes those flow very easily. They're fleeting, so it's a combination of both. So when there's emerging trends, I think the biggest thing for us on the property side of things and trying to see what's going to be next is like, why is it there? What is it? What are people talking about? What are the kids doing? What are in a few years, what is Gen Alpha's going to do? Because the Olympics. I was just thinking about the Olympics in 2028. The Gen Alphas are going to be 18, I think, around there. So I'm like, oh man, that's around the corner.
That's crazy.
They're
Collective
gonna
kids
have
of
buying power. Yeah, it's
My
gonna be
kids
crazy.
are Gen
it's
Alphas.
What is that going to be? That forecast? It's wild.
And to add to that, what will be relevant then? Because right now we've had this craze of pickleball and padel. And it's like, all right, well, will pickleball and padel actually be something that we care about in 5 years? I don't know.
All right, that's perfect, because my next thing I wanted to ask about is the length of a partnership, the length, and how long we should go, because we're on the cusp of big sporting events in the U.S. in particular, right? We've got World Cup, we've got the Olympics coming, we've got these new emerging leagues we're talking about being values-based, authentic, create this real relationship. Short or long, how do we look at that? What's your point of view?
Back to it all depends, right? It depends on what brand you have. Is it new? Is it old? Is it legendary? Is it traditional? There's so many questions. And back to really knowing who you are. So some brands go 1 year, and usually those are the ones that are going to make a splash. They want to come into the space. They want to test the market. They want exposure. Then there's typically it's 3 to 5, what we see. 3 to 5 is kind of the good space. Because you could stay in for a while, but then what happens is that you have to refresh. And that's when you want engagement. That's when you become sticky. 5 and more, now you're a legacy. Now you're really in it. You want to be in that community and that culture and grow it and nourish it and thrive in it. And that only takes time. So it's like every other relationship. A short relationship is going to give you the butterflies at the very beginning, and that's it. A longer one, you get to know them a little bit more. Long term, now we're talking about marriage.
I would say that 2 to 3 is a good place. And I hate to keep being a salesperson for Kager, but what is the evidence and what does the data say
You're
about
saving the
that?
best for last over there.
Well, here's the thing. I think the brands and the sponsors should, in theory, have a broader view on the future trends that are happening. So if I'm looking at leagues that are really being progressive, I mean, I look at the NFL, and obviously they are so dominant here in the United States. Look at what they're doing internationally. They're going to have almost the equivalent of a full season of games in international waters. So for the NFL, I'm going long, because they're just going to grow their fan base. Flag football is now going to be in LA 28. Those are the types of things that extend the value. So you want to get in now, because it's going to be a lot more in 5 years. So I would do a longer one there. And then I think it kind of goes similarly, like who are you placing your bets on to be successful? I think women's sports remains incredibly undervalued. And so you can get in now at a much lower rate. The media deals that are going to be coming up for the WNBA already has it, but for the other women's leagues, like do it before those media rights go up, because the valuations of the team and the expectations are going to go up. So, and I mean, you can go on, and it's kind of which leagues do you believe in are going to have long-term sustainability and growth?
Is there any that you're betting on?
I mean, the NFL for sure.
The NFL for sure. I mean, think about it. Jessica just mentioned flag. Flag has to be on the ballot for Brisbane to have staying power to be a part of the Olympic ecosystem forever. We're not talking about 28. 28 is cool. LA is great. All the players are going to be jumping around, wanting to be in the game. That's great.
Are you going to play?
I won't be allowed to play.
Okay.
But like if you look at the NBA, I mean, it's interesting. They're making a lot of waves with this European league that's going to be both men and women's. I mean, who knows? Like you see what's happening with the declining viewership, but like people are watching a lot more social content. So, I mean, that's where bringing an analytic approach, doing the forward-looking projections, and honestly placing your bets. To me, it's no different than making investments, and I think that approach may evolve and change over time, as you say, like who's going to be the winners. The one worry I have is the sponsors and brands can pick who the winners are.
I agree with you.
That's a good watch out. I also think, Kelvin, just your point of it's one thing to make it to LA 28 or to establish or launch the league, to the cycling example, but what are the brands that are going to carry this and be a part of the foundation that gets it to the next round, right, and keep going? All right, we're going to wrap up. One last tip you would leave everyone with if you were a brand getting ready to do a partnership.
Authenticity and action over awareness. I think that if you are purposeful as a brand in a space and you take proper action, your awareness will come around. But if you come in with just awareness at the very forefront of it, it's gonna lack. So that's mine.
I would say take the time to really allow athletes to be at the table when you're having the conversation. I've been a huge proponent of that for years. That is my calling card. Allow athletes to be at the table as you're having a conversation. Not saying a deal has to be done, but allow the athlete to actually be at the table having that conversation as the conversations and considerations are taking place.
I mean, to me, it's about understanding who you're partnering with and the investments that they have made to evolve their business so that they can meet and be a true partner with you. And I think sometimes, like the team that's winning may not be the team, but they might not be the team that has the infrastructure in place to support what you're trying to do. And realistically, especially in all US-based leagues that have drafts, there's going to be competitive balance. And there will be teams that were really great for a long time that maybe aren't as great now. And there are teams that will be really great now that won't be as good in the future. But I think like the ones that are engaging and growing their fan bases and can really support you in the ways to deliver on the ROI is important. And I don't know, you guys would have to tell me, but do the brands and sponsors think like that as part of their investment strategy?
I think
I would love for that to happen.
Well, I think it's the huge opportunity, right, that we see to evolve and get more modern in how this is done, using data, using creativity to make the deal as authentic and bring the athletes to the table and get their perspective and don't speak for them because you don't know what it's like. You're not in the midst of it. They can tell you what they think. And brands, we need all of them at the table. I'll tell you all, I want these three at the table with us as we're talking with brands for sure. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.